Great to be back with you guys. Happy New Year here on the Butt and Breneman Show. We hope you guys had a splendid holiday season. We hope you had a great New Year's. And, Bren, it is, what do they say? And then four teams remain. We're at the College Football Playoff Semifinals. It's Oregon. It's Indiana. Rematch from what was one of the better games of the season, man. First off, how are you doing? And second off, man, what's your level of excitement for this game?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to have our first show of the new year here, the Butt and Breneman Show. Listen, if you're a Big Ten fan, this is what you dream of. A chance. We know a Big Ten team's going to play in the national championship game. We got a rematch of the best two teams in the conference. We have these two programs that have it. It's really interesting to think about like 5 years ago in the Big Ten. If you would have been told Indiana and Oregon were going to play in the semifinal game in 2025 or early 2026, everyone would have called you crazy, right? Number one, Indiana wouldn't have been there. Oregon wouldn't have been in the Big Ten. And here we are, them representing our great conference. So I'm excited, Jake, because this is going to be such a physical game that's won on the line of scrimmage. A lot of talk will be about Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore and the star power at receiver and the great defenses that force turnovers. But I'm excited to see the front seven battle, the offensive line against pass blocking and establishing the run on the line of scrimmage for both teams. I think the team that runs the ball better in this game will end up winning.
I think that's been true like for the entirety of the playoffs. And that's just kind of just true in football these days. It's true in the NFL. A team that wins the line of scrimmage wins. And you're exactly right. As you were talking, I realized like maybe I got ahead of myself because Indiana's been so good that it was so routine to see them whoop up Alabama the way they did. I kind of want to go back with you for a little bit because when you and I were in college, we had to listen to people say the Big Ten, you guys are slow, you're a defensive league, the SEC runs college football. Well, yeah, we had to hear that all day long. And now the Big Ten has the last two national champions. And I just found this crazy that when Cignetti took over Indiana, that was the losingest program in college football. And then they're meeting in the Rose Bowl against Alabama, the standard of excellence in college football. Indiana hadn't won a bowl game since 1991. 1991, not a bowl game. And they find themselves in the Rose Bowl against Alabama and beat Alabama worse than Alabama had been beat also since the 1990s. Before we talk about the game, what to me, that was a beautiful watch. It was just a beautiful watch to see Indiana just take down Alabama, also knowing, we'll come back to this in a second, teams with a first-round bye in the college football playoff had not won. Indiana, the first one to do it, and they did it in convincing fashion.
Yeah, and it shows how well coached Indiana is. The fact that they were the only team that got a first round bye and won that game in their first playoff game. It's really impressive to get your guys ready to play at that level against a program like Alabama. Jake, I saw some great comparisons of the talent differential. And again, this is talent from pre-college days, the high school talent differential between who Alabama has signed and who Indiana has signed. Indiana hasn't signed a 5-star. It was like over the past 4 years, it was like 54 stars versus like for Bama versus like 10 for Indiana. But that when you're between the lines, in that 100 yards, the talent in high school doesn't matter. It's about what have you done for me lately? What have you done? How have you developed in your program? How disciplined are you? The best indicator of how much Indiana dominated this game was Alabama running the ball for 1 yard a carry. They could not run the ball at all. It was like 1.3 yards per carry, I think, on the day.
Yeah.
I mean, Alabama could not establish anything on the line of scrimmage. That's where Kirk Cignetti built his program. Then you add in the skill on top of it, the way Fernando Mendoza is playing and how he's been a distributor and only threw the ball 16 times, but had 3 touchdowns and took care of the football, didn't turn it over. You talk about the defense and how they've been able to force turnovers. It's beautiful to watch, as you put it, Jay.
They beat them up, man. They were more physical, too. I mean, there was like a play early in the game where their wide receiver had a push crack on Alabama's safety, and he came down there and gave them up smooch on the cheek. He snapped his head back on a little push crack, and that just set the tone the rest of the day. D'Angelo Pons, this is what I love. Like, Alabama fans couldn't grasp. They're like, what do you mean we're going to lose to Indiana? Like, what are you talking about? We're Alabama. Then they were talking mess about D'Angelo Pons. They said he's 5'9", 170. He's not big. And he's the one that, cracked the rib of Ty Simpson and knocked him out of the game. I mean, it was poetic. So I say that to say this, as we talk about Oregon, Indiana. Indiana has made a living. How often have we said for the first time ever, or for the first time in decades, that whenever there's a long-term trend or whenever history says something's impossible, Signetti steps in and says that
Yeah.
does not apply to us. So teams meeting in the postseason from a conference game earlier in the year. So conference rematches in the postseason. This is where we get
Yeah.
it's hard to beat a good team twice. There's been 8 instances where opponents have met in the postseason for the second time. How many wins do you think the team that got the win earlier in the year got again in the postseason? 8 instances.
Oh man, that's tough. I would say I'm going to say, is it around 500?
Zero. 0 and
Wow.
8. 0 and 8. 0 and
Wow.
8. 0 and 8. I couldn't believe it. I want to shout out to Harold Shelton, our stats guy, and does a bunch of great work at BTN
Zero
right now.
wins.
0 wins. So it's hard to
Wow.
beat a good team twice. Uh, what do you think, man? I mean, you kind of said it, you laid it out, but just peel back a layer for me here. Like, are you does that scare you at all about Indiana? What are the keys for Indiana? I know you mentioned I agree with you with the line of scrimmage. I think these are the two best quarterbacks in college football, the two best quarterback
Yeah.
prospects. But hey, we also know Oregon's running back Jordan Davison down. They lost a bunch of guys to the portal. The college football schedule, we could do a whole show on this. Oregon really has two healthy starting level running backs. Man,
Yeah.
what are you
I mean,
feeling with this
I
game?
think a couple things. Well, I mean, we kind of glanced over Oregon's dominating performance as well against Texas Tech and how they forced turnovers and
Shut
got
up.
after them from the very start. So I feel good about Oregon, better than I did go into the playoff. Like I feel better about Oregon. I think everyone probably does than I did going into the playoff right now. I feel really good about what Oregon can do the way Dante Moore is playing. A couple keys that come to mind when you ask me, Jake. First, can Indiana win the pass rush battle again and do it without selling out all the time? Their ability to generate pressure without selling out has been the foundation of that defense. And in that first matchup, they rattled Dante Moore, and they got to recreate that chaos, that chaos without sacrificing that coverage integrity with the speed that Oregon has down the field. I mean, Fernando Mendoza, he's got to
Let me
continue.
stop you there
Yeah,
because I want to have that conversation. I think that to me that is the biggest key when Oregon has the ball. Can they handle but it's simulated pressure from
yeah,
Indiana. They don't often send more than 4. It's just on quarterbacks to figure out what 4 are coming and then
yeah,
figure out they play 90% zone coverage. They play a ton of
yeah,
zone coverage and their zone drops are extremely disciplined. And to me in the Alabama game, Ty Simpson there was times when he had a clean pocket and he's like looking behind him as if there's a rusher coming. He had no idea what he was looking at. That's the
yeah.
same thing that happened to Julian Sayin. It's the same thing that happened to Dante Moore. Tell me this. Do you think the second matchup helps Oregon? Like, do you think there's any benefit to having seen the simulated pressures? Or do you think, hey, it's simulated pressures. It may not make as big of a factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's, I think it's less about what they've seen, what Oregon's seen from Indiana. It's more about Dante Moore has what 6 more starts under his belt since that
Okay.
game, and
Yeah.
has a lot more experience seeing the field, seeing different looks, playing really good teams, playing 2 playoff games to get to this point. So I do think there's an experience factor that comes into it. Part of it, though, Jake, is also the ability for the defensive line, with or without simulated pressure, to just win those one-on-one battles. One of the good things about when you bring simulated pressure is if it does get picked up, which a lot of times you're only bringing 4 on the sim pressure, so it does, but it allows some of your defensive linemen to have those one-on-one matchups where you're not getting double teamed. And Oregon, Oregon does some creative things with Kenyon Sadiq and keeping him in to chip and then get out in the flat. So he's helping in pass protection some. So that chess match is going to be really critical to see. Hey, can Oregon can they get 5 out on a route and not have to keep? Can they get 6 out on a route and not have to keep them in to help pass protect if they can't handle that simulated pressure? That's one thing I think fans don't realize is when you struggle to protect, when you're struggling, if you're Oregon and you can't and you don't know where the simulated pressure is coming from, and you got to keep someone in, you got to keep a 6 blocker in. That's the tight end of the running back. That's one less guy to throw the football to. So it
Yeah.
impacts it from that way as well when the quarterback now has less options, which makes it easier to cover down the field.
And it's one less guy. Like ideally, I don't have a problem keeping a tight end or a running back in. but you have five protectors. So
Hmm.
usually if your defense is rushing four, you should be able to get every pass
No
catcher
doubt.
out. But with the simulated pressure, the beauty in it is it becomes about assignments. You assume there's six rushers. So the tight end suddenly has to stick on that nickel that came, but then there's only three more rushers coming. So you have five linemen to block
Yeah.
three. It's a way to skew
Yeah.
the numbers. And to this, Bren, the Dan Lanning was extremely aggressive against Texas Tech, and he's been aggressive
Mhm.
all year, even going back to when he played Penn State. It was 4th and 1 in their own territory on their very
Yeah.
first drive, and he goes for it. He's not going to change who he is. But how big of a factor is that in this game? Because we saw Alabama try to go for it on a 4th and short early in the Rose Bowl, and they got stuffed. And that was an emotional and mental swing in the Hoosiers' favor. How do you see that factoring into everything we just said?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dan Lanning's proven that he's going to be aggressive as heck. And in a semifinal game, like you're playing to win. And I think one thing that Dan Lanning's done a good job of is using those game swinging moments to his advantage. And his players have executed. I mean, you think about the Penn State game, you think about some of those moments that have gotten here where early in games, Dan Lanning's made the decision to go for it on 4th down, to keep his offense on the field. And it's not just that, it's also the aggressiveness on defense too, when to bring pressure, when to sell out, when not to. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch, just to see how these head coaches handle momentum and listen, once you get momentum, you better make sure you keep that momentum. So now
Mm-hmm.
you're making some decisions. Should we go for it on 4th and 2? Because if we don't get it, we may lose momentum. But do you also lose momentum just if you punt versus if we needed some juice? Hey, it may be risky, but it's time to go for it on 4th down. I think that's going to be fun to see how Dan Lanning handles that and how much he trusts his young quarterback, Dante Moore. Jake, I wanted to ask you, there's so much talk about Oregon and their speed. And that's kind of the first thing everyone talks about, right? Oregon, how fast they are. I was just watching a show this morning that was talking about, Oregon and how fast they're playing. Do you think Oregon has more team speed than Indiana does right now? Because when I watched Indiana play, man, I watched them against Alabama. Like they were as fast as Alabama was in that field. They flew around. The receivers were as fast. Who do you think has like the true athleticism, speed? Battle. Who wins that battle in this game?
I don't think there's a noticeable difference.
Yeah,
I think Indiana has plenty of speed. Like, I don't think when I watched Miami play Ohio State, I felt like Miami was faster than Ohio State. Whether that's true in a bubble or not, I
yeah,
felt Miami was faster and Miami was more physical. Whereas I don't think I'm gonna see this game and say, regardless, Oregon was faster. I think Oregon's offensive line is more athletic than Indiana's, but that doesn't mean Oregon's offensive line is better than Indiana's. There's
yeah,
two things that I think of when you say this, as it applies to this matchup. The emergence of Charlie Becker. Charlie Becker didn't play in
man.
the first matchup against Oregon. That guy is a track state champion back in Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
and he has long speed that Oregon didn't see in the first matchup. He gives them a different level. But then I go back to the simulated pressures. When you are thinking, you don't
Yeah,
play as fast. So
yeah.
Indiana messes with you mentally, which slows down their opponents. So even if it were true, I don't. I think Indiana's scheme slows down Oregon. How do you see it though?
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I've been thinking about it does because again, your first reaction when you think about Oregon, Indiana, is that Oregon has so much more speed, a lot more talent, more playmakers, and they may have more talent on paper. But from what I've seen and how Indiana just played against Alabama, I think it's a pretty even matchup from a speed standpoint. It's a great call on Charlie Becker. The way, I mean, not just the speed he has, but the ability to go up with the body control, make contested catches in critical moments. There's a lot of speed on that defensive line for Indiana in the defensive backfield. So I think it's a pretty even matchup, and that is why in this game I lean Indiana right now. We'll pick the game in a second, but I think when you combine the physicality Indiana's played with the discipline that they have, and then that there isn't a speed favorability for Oregon, I like Indiana in this game.
Yeah, he's tall, he's long, and Surratt's a great receiver. Cooper's a great receiver, and both of those guys are fast. But Charlie Becker, you can see his track background on the field. He just
Yeah,
chews up grass. And I go back to the Penn State game was kind of his coming out party. Early in that game, he had 7 catches for over 100 yards. Early in that game, though, he was running post routes and clear out routes, and he was behind Penn State's defense like 2 or 3 times. But
Yeah.
Mendoza didn't see him because they hadn't built that trust yet. But now what you're seeing is he's built that equity, that trust. Mendoza went
Yeah.
to him in the Big Ten championship with the game on the line.
Yeah.
That's a whole different element. It forces you to defend
Yeah.
the length as well as the width of the field. Let's
Yeah.
talk real quick about the quarterbacks before we give our prediction. I kind of wanted to just ask you, obviously Mendoza won the Heisman. I see a lot of people say Dante Moore is the better prospect, but what comes to mind when you see these guys, and if you want to, how would you rank them?
Yeah, as of from the body of work this season, I have Fernando Mendoza ahead of Dante Moore in who I like in this game and who I like in college football right now. I'm not I'm not a pro talent evaluator. I think they're both going to be amazing pros. That's clear. But as of right now, Jake, if I had to take one quarterback, I'm taking Fernando Mendoza. I mean, he's some of the late game heroics we've seen, in the first meeting against Oregon, against Penn State, some of what Mendoza has had to do. I think has been really impressive. And he's taking care of the football, 33 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. He hasn't put it in harm's way. He's a leader. People rally around him. He has that clutch gene that quarterbacks need to have. I love everything Fernando Mendoza has. For Dante Moore, I just think you get a little bit more of the mobility factor and the arm talent that maybe Mendoza doesn't have, and a little bit more of a live arm from Dante Moore than Mendoza. There's been a lot of great quarterbacks that have live arms that haven't turned out as well, but Moore has been able to put it all together. And in his first year, as a starter at Oregon, has done a really good job just being calm under pressure, seeing the field well, has gotten the experience. So I think Mendoza's the more efficient, polished passer, really excels in managing games, protecting the ball, making the big plays when it's necessary, not turning it over. Where Dante Moore, to me, Jake, has a higher pure playmaking ability and burst, and the production can be more volatile at times, but has the ability to have a higher ceiling, but can get a little disrupted when I think he faces elite pressure, which he's going to see against Indiana.
Yeah, I know what you mean, man. In terms of like the mobility, the funny thing is, I think Mendoza is going to run a faster 40 than Dante Moore.
Yeah.
Like, I think Mendoza is actually like faster at the highest level. And his legs have showed up big. Mendoza had a rushing touchdown in the first matchup as well. You're splitting hairs, man. It's probably a preference, on which one you like. Both have been outstanding to your point. I think as far as this game goes, which quarterback can avoid making the big mistake, the big
Yeah.
critical
Yeah.
mistake? Sometimes it's not about what you add, it's about what you gain by not losing or subtracting through turnovers or through mistakes. And remember the first time Mendoza threw a pick six and had to
Yeah.
overcome that with a
Incredible.
touchdown drive and taking the lead. So I think the quarterback matchup is going to be fascinating. All right, you want to do this? You want to pick this game?
Yeah, let's do it. You going first? Who you
I'll
got?
go. I'll go first. Well, this game's a pick 'em in my opinion. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
pick 'em, right? We've laid it out. Rematches are 0-8. Quarterbacks are even. Two of the best Joe Moore Award finalist offensive lines. Here's the difference to me. I think it's a complete, and Dan Lanning won't say this. He's going to make no excuses, but I'll say it. It's a complete disservice to the Oregon Ducks, to Lapoy, to Will Stein, and to us as fans that Will Stein, who is going to be the head coach of Kentucky, and Tosh Lapoy is going to be the head coach at Cal, are preparing for Indiana, which requires everything you got, while also
Yeah.
trying to manage the transfer portal at their next destinations. And that, I would say, gives Indiana advantage. The injury or I don't know if it's been fully confirmed. It seems highly likely that Jordan Davison is going to miss this game. That gives an advantage to Indiana. So as I'm splitting
Yeah.
hairs right here, I would lean, I think Indiana. I just feel better about betting Indiana to win with everything considered.
Yeah. I'm with you. After a few factors, watching Indiana dismantle Alabama the way they did in the Rose Bowl, 38-3. They showed elite balance on offense. They showed playmaking ability and discipline on defense. Their offense is one of the best in the country. Their defense ranks near the top. I believe in Kirk Cinetti, and it's hard to bet against that man after what he's done this season. Indiana is going to be able to control the tempo in this game with their run game. I think they'll be able to bring pressure and get Dante Moore off his tracks a little bit. And then Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman level quarterback, staying calm, taking care of the football. As you said, Jake, not making the huge mistake. All those reasons have me picking Indiana in this game. I think it's close. I'm going to go 28-24 Indiana, but a beautiful
Ooh.
game to wrap up our Big Ten competition this year.
Say 24-17
Okay.
Hoosiers. A little lower scoring. But I got one more for you before we get out of here. Kenyon Sadiq is the best tight end in college football. I think he's
No
going to
doubt.
have to step up in the absence of Jordan Davison because he fills that fullback role. But how about Riley Nowakowski for the Hoosiers? Do you pay?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy is just he's like one of the unsung heroes of the Hoosier offense. Anything stand out to you about these two tight ends?
Yeah, well, I listen. Anytime you get a tight end who's wearing a number that's not in the 80s, he's got a little bit more grit to him.
Yeah.
A little bit more toughness. I mean, that couldn't have been you and me, Jake. We would have never
No.
worn that number. But yeah,
Hey, fun
listen,
fact, I wore 97 in high school on
did
junior
you?
varsity as a wide receiver. I wore 97.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was a punter and a kicker. But yeah, I
Yeah.
had to rock the 97 back in the day.
No, but Riley's Nowakowski's become a really good player and an important part of this offense. I mean, not just in the pass game. I mean, he's made plays in the pass game too, but the way they use him as kind of that off ball tight end where he's moving around the backfield, and he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he plays a lot bigger than he is. I think what's he listed like 230 something, and he's not a huge tight end.
240, yeah.
240, yeah. But he's become a really, really good player and another great tight end in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's going to be a great matchup, man. This is what you want. For all the bad about college football, and there's transfer portal stuff. This is always a tough time. The fact of the matter is both Indiana and Oregon are trying to compete for a national title. Oregon, I believe it's a matter of time with Dan Lanning before they win a national title. You got Miami and Ole Miss, the storylines on the other side of the bracket. The good thing is one of those fan bases is going to get to enjoy a national title, which is, I think, good for college football. So it's a chance to look at the positive. But it's great to see you. We appreciate you guys tuning in to the first edition of the Butt and Breneman Show of the year 2026. We're looking forward to many more this year. We'll see you guys next week.